platform in its older form. And so they might hear of things they can do. They go in and they talk to a chat, usually on the auto model, which might just be giving you the lowest one. And then they hit a dead end. So they're overestimating what they understand is possible now. But then they go to an environment that's actually quite constrained, usually on a base level model, and maybe not even with web search turned on. So they still worry about hallucinations. I've not had hallucinations for months and months and months. If you turn on web search, or if you use the top available model, you shouldn't really be seeing any of that, because it's only really on the base models that I seem to see that.
Nice, thank you. So you talk quite a lot about underestimating it. Where do you think people overestimate it at the moment?
Yeah, the overestimation is, as I say, if they they hear that they can do something, and they might go attend a webinar like this, and then they go to a regular chat model, and they think, okay, AI can do this now, but then they find it can't. And what happens is they get dismayed, and then that negative experience sort of updates their priors to be like, AI can't do this. I think there's a huge, and I'm sure we'll come on to that, within agencies, there's a huge range of experience. Even in a small team, you've got everything from, beginner or doesn't use it, all the way through to actually someone who's quite competent. So people are in very different places. Across the population, beyond agencies, I think a lot of people are still in a 2024 mode where they tried it out. And some people, of course, have loved it and carried on, but I think a lot of people are, if they'll talk about it down the pub, they will sort of describe their experience of it maybe a year ago, and that's what they think AI can do. And it really is changing a lot quicker than that. Yeah,
thank you. And I think what we're seeing, like if you take a step back and look at AI use, like across agencies or across everything, is it's not that people aren't motivated to test tools. The problem, particularly within agencies, is there's a huge range in capability, as you just mentioned, Tom, which leads to issues and structure. The agencies aren't putting things in place purposefully, and they're kind of just like letting it to chance, which is a huge issue. And this leads us into our next area, which is training. So what I want to talk about next is how to train a team without creating dependence. So a lot of AI training looks impressive on the surface, but it often creates false confidence rather than real capability. So Andy, you took a AI course and felt it was basically a sales machine, not real learning. What should leaders look for in training, and what are the red flags that are going to waste everyone's time?
I mean, so yeah, I think last year, or actually might have been like early December the year before, I attended some seminar in Manchester and was really impressed with the speaker. It was those exciting times, and she was offering training. That's her entire business. And I thought, okay, let's do this. Well, I wasn't really interested in, saying I'm a trainer. I was in it for hoping for some like deeper knowledge, only to find out very shortly in that, there is no deeper knowledge. No one really knows what's going on inside that neural net anyway, even the creators. It's all about, it was at the time when people were calling themselves prompt engineers. And I quickly realized what I'd signed up to was a training course training trainers how to train trainers in training. It's just a generic skill that you could literally just put any skin on, any kind of course. And so I decided to just have a little bit of fun with it. So I did all of my answers with GPT, submitted everything with GPT, and I knew when the assessment came that it was GPT. And it was, this is one of the best submissions we've ever read. And, you've got a distinction. It was just absolute, I have 2 postgrads in education, so it felt like an insult. I would never even want to put it on my LinkedIn profile because I actually feel ashamed. It's not worth the paper it's written on. So I would, yeah. And the other thing to note was by the time I completed it, it was still using 4 as a model, and we were already in 5 point something at this time. So it's all obsolete very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So I would just beware with any training that you undertake that actually we're all just kind of learning as we go. Maybe if there's official things from the platform, you could follow up on that. Don't take a course in being a trainer because it's not worth the paper it's written on. And definitely don't take it if you're looking for some inside knowledge into any of the platforms, tips, how to prompt, stuff like that. It's just best to learn. I like to know how stuff works on the inside. So I think for me, it's more about knowing how it works. So, you know, experimenting with perhaps building your own if you can, and just seeing what it does. But yeah, I'm very wary of anything that is, you know, claiming to be training, and especially accredited training. Like I say, I wasn't in it for the accreditation. I was thinking, well, maybe there's some deeper learning here, but yeah, just beware.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I think that the difficulty is, like, as you said, that things become obsolete so quickly. So particularly training around certain tools that are developing very quickly, it will be obsolete very fast. So it's very hard to say to your whole team, like, hey, take this intensive training course, and you'll know there is definitely ways around it. So what I've really learned through, like, all my kind of studies, and I'm looking at more from a process perspective rather than the tool one, is actually it's about learning the concepts of how you can apply AI and how to use, like, certain tools properly. So, like, understanding the concepts of LLMs and multimodal models and data, and actually be surprised how many people don't understand, like, where and when to use AI and how to apply it. So that can be trained, because then it kind of doesn't really matter what tool you use. You need to make sure that your team are on a good level of understanding of, like, okay, so I'm working on this, actually what I could do is this, or this is how I need to use, how I could use AI to speed this up or to address this process. And that's what people need to be trained on. Is now we have this whole new resource of tools and kind of ways of working available. People need to be on a good level of understanding of how to apply that to their jobs, and that can be trained and does need to be trained in agencies. But specific, like, this is how you use ChatGPT, needs to kind of be very small amounts of sharing knowledge, sharing links and stuff like that. So over to you, Tom. So you built a doc-based system where a new team member can follow a workflow step by step. What makes training actually land? Simplicity, standards, or something else? And you're on mute again. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah. So I don't want to speak for all levels of AI training, okay, but for where most people are at, where they're like, okay, there's more adoption we need to do, then here is the first level, I think, that works, and anyone could do today with the kind of just tools you might already have. So first of all, simplicity, yes, agree with that. Simple, clear steps. One way to think about it is you're prompting a human. With an AI, good prompting is often about a series of steps. If you try and get it to do everything at once, and the top pro models actually are extremely good at actually working through a complex prompt, but very often you'll be having it solve one thing, and then you can ask another, and then it sort of builds on that because of the context in the conversation is actually stacking up bricks. And I think it's the same with people. There's only, you know, they'd be productive biting off one thing at a time. So giving them one clear sequential step does help them build that foundation and build that comfort, even if potentially all of it can be automated later. And just briefly on standards, you can bake standards into prompts. So in fact, whether it's a human or AI. So the checklist I've always remembered, forget where I picked this up, but thinking about quality, quantity, and behavior. And usually whatever comes to mind for you on those three actually becomes quite a good sense checklist, but you can of course always reiterate on prompts or training in the future. So the thing that the model that if it's all right if I quickly share a browser tab here.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Let's see if it pulls up. So if I share the right thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
So this is a Google Doc, and this is an easy way for your team to engage, because if they have this doc and they have just ChatGPT open, we'll just make sure people put it on the top available model to them and not just the auto mode. And also maybe turn on web search or use deep research. But what I do is I give them a doc, and first there's a README, and here's how it works. And the basics are, on the left, I have these tabs, which everyone will have in a Google Doc or equivalent software. And where I've got a robot emoji, that's a prompt. And where there is a notepad, that's where you're going to paste in the output from that prompt. The one with arrows is where something might come in externally. So we'll record the call transcripts. There might be other rough notes. So basically, you're going to bring everything into this document. So I'll prep the call, and this is the shortest one, but just simple questions. That means I can go into the call after getting the lead. I'll paste in the call transcript and any other rough notes. And then I will write up the discovery notes. And this is a longer prompt. And then I will paste that summary back in. I might also just jot down my own ideas if I took notes during the call. I then have a very comprehensive deep research one, and I will paste the market research in there. And then I will write up a strategy memo based on that and paste the strategy memo there. And then we will write our proposal based on the structure we have. I will even test the psychographic of the customer, which is extracted in the discovery write-up, against the proposal, just as a final sense check. And so what happens is you work through that one step at a time. It's just copy, paste, and then paste back. And then you delete, and there's even a checklist saying, here's what to delete. Delete the robots tab. So you end up with documentation that is good for your team to just have in hand anyway. So the market research is comprehensive. And I always read it. You don't have to, but that is actually just context for the next message, which is the strategy memo. And then, of course, you can loop around the proposal. We will discuss all that. But that's, I think, a good first step for training is actually just giving them processes that are just a doc that they can bounce between. We are, of course, building things that go beyond that, but I think actually, like, this is still the most robust thing. That means I actually have my other, including reading, actually will turn around all of this with 1 hour's time tracked against each proposal that I'm doing, which is different to the 2 days that I used to spend.
Thank you. And I think, I mean, like, it's SOPs, right? So it's what every agency strives for anyway, or always says, like, we need to update our SOPs and stuff. And I think just using AI or whichever tools, and the person who is documenting the process is using those tools to gain efficiency. So like reviewing your processes and thinking, okay, so where can I speed things up? If this thing currently takes me 4 hours, my go-to assumption is that I can save time if I use things more effectively. Like, how much time can I save? So if I were to review the process and think, okay, where can I speed things up here, and then document it using the tools available, and that actually gives you a kind of living case to share with your team, and will make them say, okay, to follow this process, use this tool, and then they will be learning, okay, AI really helps here, and hopefully then they will start to be able to also apply it. Because what you want with your team is that not that they just tick boxes and follow the processes that you've said. Obviously, you want them to open their minds to where else they could do that, because obviously, Tom, you've only got exposure to certain parts of the agency. You won't be involved in the day-to-day with like every single person's role. But what you want, particularly in agencies where there's so many different levels of role going on, what you want is everyone to have this approach, like, where can I do things better? Where can I cut out my rubbish admin time? Where can I just automate that so I don't have to spend time doing that? Where can I do better analysis, because actually this stuff exists and can pull in more data than I currently have access to if I just put it into Google, for example. So it's like getting them to think differently by applying it in a practical way, which is really great about your example, Tom.
Yeah, I think I'll just briefly say, it doesn't address every kind of AI implementation one could or should be doing on your agency. I think what's nice about this is it does make it easy for some people to engage. But the other key thing is this is a method that they could start to accrue, because they can open a Google Doc, they can find what works. And if they don't get something they want from prompt, you can just go and update the template. All I'm doing is copying that template, renaming it by client name. And if I want to change the prompt, I just go back to the original template, and that will always be there for those runs in the future.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Okay, Zoe, so in a growing agency, juniors still need fundamentals. This has come up on every webinar I've done, which is interesting, so I'm glad we're talking about this. So how do you roll out AI support without eroding skills that people need to build, and without seniors becoming full-time reviewers?
Yeah, I suppose this example I'm going to give leads on quite nicely from what you and Tom were saying, just saying around like documentation. And I guess a mistake I learned firsthand was AI being introduced as like a shortcut before people understood the job. And I myself was getting, like, we use ClickUp as an example, get really excited. Again, I'm from an ops background, thought I knew all the processes going in and like creating them and forcing them before I've sat down with the team and explained, you know, how I've got there. So as I say, for example, with ClickUp, we've built it out to force those steps in the delivery process. But as we were mentioning earlier with Pace, it's already changing. So before it was like standard automations. Now we've got super agents there that can do like part of that agentic thinking already. So I've got this Pace happening on one side of what we're building. And then I've got a new junior team coming in, seeing all this going on, and perhaps not even knowing what their day-to-day is before we dive into that. So I think clearly juniors, and not just juniors, I'd say like all the way through the business, depending on your role, you need to be walked through end to end for a process, why it exists. We need to be giving people what good looks like. We have our own wiki or hub, you might call it, which has standout, what we call epic examples of work, and like how you can hold the bar, what you should measure yourself against. And then the people doing the day-to-day can help with that evolution and that build of the process. So they obviously know better, right? They're in that. We ask that people speak up if something's taken them a really long time. So they might not know the solution, but they can raise a hand and say, do you know what, this has taken me longer than I think it should. I don't have the answers right now, but I know that it's taking a while. And could ops dive in and have a look, and we build that together? And similar to Tom, we've got those docs, we've got them in ClickUp, but it's the same sort of thing where people can document how they're doing things and suggestions, and then ops will prioritize and jump in and build that with them. Also with the team, we're really clear that AI is to support with thinking rather than replacing it as well. So that means being really specific with where AI right now is allowed to help, and we actually don't really use it for creativity. By that I mean like new thinking. We've given it a go for like PR ideas. It really struggles to do new formats. You have to like feed in everything that you've done historically. So instead we're using it more to like gather summaries, spot patterns, but anything like strategic or client facing still has that clear human ownership. And to your point on seniors as editors, I think AI aside, I would never want to be paying a senior in my team to be editing anyway. So like workflows matter a lot. As I mentioned, we've got those clear standards and criteria for output, and seniors know that if they're having to endlessly go in and tweak that, or they've got prompts for what could be AI, like little rocket ships using the word quietly, really short sentences, like they can spot those straight away and will send it back and hold the team accountable. They won't sit there like dig in. So I guess in summary, I wouldn't say AI is there to make things faster at all costs. It's more to build that capability that can scale with the team so they can focus more on that blue sky thinking day to day.
Yeah, and which is good for the agency, as in it's actually getting the people that you can employ as experts to do the stuff that they are really talented at. But also it's good for them as well and their motivation, because who wants to be spending like time bogged down in boring admin, like like drawing up notes, like pulling together like that stuff is boring. So it's good for you as an agency to be more efficient in that way, but also it's much more motivating for your team to be spending time on the stuff they really enjoy. And your point about outlining where AI should be used and not is is so important. I think this is really what agencies need to look at this year, is because people are taking like a blanket approach to say AI causes problems because, you know, like it turns out the same ideas and it isn't good for creative thinking, but it is great at so many things that an agency has to do. So if you apply it in some areas of an agency in the right way, that's when it works. It's not that everywhere across the agency needs to use more AI for every process, but you need to be taking direction or giving direction as an agency. This is what we want to use it for, and this is where we definitely do not want to use it, or you can use it or use this tool in this way. So that's where agencies just need to give direction and take a lead and give a stance, and then it will be much improved.
Yeah, and we voted on, I suppose, where we were spending the most time initially and focused on one process first. So PR is our largest team. That's where people were voting. They're like draining a lot of time building media lists, building stuff out, like again, like, and that's where we picked as our example to go, rather than across everything. This is what we're trying to speed up. And then once we had one right, you can see it sort of flow from there.
Yeah, and so in AI and agency, so how I work with agencies is like we do an audit. So we do an audit to look at where which processes have the biggest things to get first, basically. So you do an audit across like a number of processes, say 10, you say, okay, so these are the ones where you get the biggest gains and we can apply AI really well, and you address those first, and then you start to work through other ones. So that's a really great approach, is to say, where do we currently feel like we're wasting time, or where can we actually see we're wasting quite a lot of time, and you know, and then you address that, looking at the process and looking at then what tools you can do to get that. Okay, so let's move into the next section, which is process versus adoption. Kind of leads me into that, versus tool versus chaos. So one of the most common strategies I hear is like, just let everyone experiment. So in agency world, like people obviously like their team members to you know, like do quite a lot of testing and to bring in their own ideas. That's great, because they obviously want teams of like innovators and people who are not just kind of ticking boxes, they are finding things for themselves. So the approach I've heard a lot of people say is that, you know, like, we'll let the team just find their own tools, they can bring them in, decide what to do from there. So it's useful and it's good to encourage people to experiment, and obviously to learn more about how to use AI and to find tools that obviously you as one person wouldn't have time to find, like one person's responsibility. Everyone needs to be responsible for finding things that will make their own roles more effective, but it's not a plan. So it's not a structured approach, and it will lead to inefficiencies as well. So you could like get some efficiencies through someone finding a great tool, but it won't lead to a very structured approach to it. So over to you again, Zoe. So if a team is using AI but nothing is actually improving, so that could be speed or quality or margin, what's usually missing? Is it ownership, process design, documentation, or accountability?
I mean, yeah, I'd probably say it's usually a combination of all those things you've listed there. But I think, as you were sort of alluding to a minute ago, the biggest gap really is ownership. I wouldn't say AI fails because people aren't capable as such. It's just because no one's been tasked on the team for how it's meant to be used. So to echo what you were saying, I would highly encourage experimentation. You wouldn't want to get people to fear trying that out for themselves and bringing things to the table, but without that final ownership being clear in your agency, as you said, everyone experiments and nothing really compounds over time. So for us, our department leads steer like the vote in the areas that need to get the attention first, right? So our head of PR, our head of SEO would be the ones that look at what needs a fix, so to speak. They'll be speaking to the team. We don't like to add more and more tools. It will tend to be like the process that's highlighted. But then ops, so our head of ops is the one that's responsible for owning that and rolling it out throughout the whole agency. So it's not finished until it's rolled out. And we try to have that level of consistency. So if one thing's happening in one team, we try to replicate it in another. So you don't have a bunch of like silo pods doing different things. And then, as we were talking about a few questions up, process is obviously a huge piece as well. Like, as I said, you can't just layer AI onto what's an already messy workflow. And we did a huge piece in 2025. It was really great for us, actually, like to sit down and go through all of our processes and really try to make them uniform before we then built them up to make them more repeatable and systemized. So that's, yeah, really, I suppose what helps to grow it is having that clear owner, and it could be two for different sort of elements of it, like the pick in the process versus the rollout, and then having that documentation to follow up as well.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it is of course all of those things, like, you know, like but I haven't seen in many agencies that like someone is really taking the lead with how to implement this, and that's often the issue. Is you might have one department head who's really keen on you know, like trying tools, but often without particularly someone who's very ops minded involved, you won't actually be looking at the returns, and you won't actually be looking at like, is this useful, does it add to our processes, does it have an output that we actually want? So what is the output that we want? That's the first thing. Like, what do we want to gain by implementing this new tool? And actually that's even a step beyond what you should be doing. You should be, as you said, Zoe, like looking at the process, not looking at tools. You should probably, most agencies have got all the tools they need. They probably don't need any more. They've probably already bought some tools that they're not using well. So like they've got this whole suite of tools. You can use those, utilize them much better. That's the point. You're normally using about 20% of the tools that you could be using and optimizing. So you've got plenty of opportunity there. No need to change. Click up the panel, like who cares? Like all these platforms are very similar. You've chosen one, stick with it, and just make sure you someone who's an expert in that field understands how that tool is evolving and where to use it better, documenting it and training the rest of their team on the efficiencies that they could get. So,
yeah, just like with tools, I guarantee you've got the people in the team as well. I think 2024, as Andy was saying, with like prompt engineers, there was a bit of a hype for hiring like heads of AI, new prompt engineers coming through. Like I nearly fell into that. Like I didn't really know who I needed. I was just searching for this like AI guru to come in, but actually 9 times out of 10, you've got an ops person, you've got your head of department, you know what you can make more efficient. You can figure that out together. You don't necessarily need a new hire.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Tom, so you're looking at adoption of either Google Workspace or like using Skills more. So meeting the team where they are versus building towards Skills in open formats, which is obviously what you explained a bit about before that you feel really passionate about. How should an agency decide where to standardize first, and what's the risk of choosing incorrectly?
Yeah, the challenge is you have a two-sided market to consider. For the AI, I think the skill standard is a safe bet because, well, it's open and adopted, so you could just jump between tools as they integrate the skills format, and more, by the day, since we even spoke 2 days ago, Emily, there are multiple user-friendly interfaces for using skills coming up. And even if for some reason that skills format changed, it's just text files. Yeah, it can have scripts in the same directory, but essentially they're prompts that are text, so you can just copy and paste that into whatever comes next. So I think for the AI side, the skills standard is actually a safe bet. And even if you don't call it that, you just call it prompts, fine. Okay, but the moment it's in a markdown file next to one of these apps, it's there as a skill that you can just summon like a magic wand. For the human, well, until the last couple of days, the only apps you could use skills in would be Claude Code or Codex. And it is just kind of the chat app, but it is in a terminal. And if you ask someone to open a terminal on their computer, they're going to think, hang on, I'm not Neo in the Matrix. Now, it's really not like that, but still, it's not my wish list item for an interface for my team. Okay, they're technically astute people. They are not normies, but they are not sat in a terminal in the way that I've become comfortable for other reasons. So that's why I think the Google approach is good. Like, part of the Google question for us is that the team have heard about these new Google workflows where you can automate AI stuff across the workspace suite, which sounds great. And I actually thought that makes a lot of sense. We're already embedded there. But my problems with that so far are, it turns out you can start doing that, but on your own account, but you can't actually be putting stuff onto shared drives. So that immediately actually strikes out that until they develop it. And the second is, well, you actually have to, anything you have to build in there. So you might actually have to build stuff in AppScript. You're like, well, if I have to develop anyway, maybe I should actually just develop in something a bit more portable. So what I have decided is I will make a course. I'm going to record a course on using these terminal apps, because it is actually just a chat interface. But, you know, just want to help people feel comfortable just by at least going through a video or two. So I'm going to do that for my team, and I will be selling that externally. However, just in the last couple of days, in fact, there are 3 different ones with the same name: OpenWork, they're open source, and they're a nicer chat interface, and they embed skills. And that's, but part of the problem is that they all have the same name because everyone's sort of just doing the same thing. No doubt there's others. So I think this will standardize quickly. Claude Code, in fact, just again, the last 2 days, I've launched Claude for desktop, where you can let it connect to a folder on your computer and actually operate and save files there. Okay, which means you're saving memory. Okay. It's not having to just remember what you've just prompted it. It could actually pull up a file and instructions and plans or client details and so on. So this is, by the day, becoming more accessible, but the tools are changing fast. But I think what's certain is, whatever you think might happen next, whatever the tools are, actually, it doesn't change the first step. You need to figure out what would be most valuable. So you've already mentioned some good ideas on this. For some of you watching, you might be up for something like this. I connected what's called an MCP to Asana and Harvest. It's basically a bit like a way you can connect your AI to your software. In fact, I've even got Facebook ads and Google ads MCP set up this week, which is fun for experimenting. And what I did is I asked it to do the analysis on our time tracking data for the paid media team specifically, and their tasks that they've been ticking in their projects, for it to go and do the data analysis. And I got this fantastic set of reports that helped us rank what would be most productive to do. That should not, though, if you did something like that, should not negate the engagement with the people. So the idea is already on just going to the people who know intuitively where the pain is every day. And also, I think just having them engage in that process is important, because otherwise it feels like it's being steamrolled. And actually, what's easy to forget for people in the leadership positions like ourselves is people are actually kind of a little nervous about this. I don't think they should be nervous. I want them to be hyper-powered 100x employees, and I want an environment that we have an environment that's very much encouraged. But actually, I think people are a little nervous. So having them engage in that direction is, I feel like, important. It's easy to start forgetting the human side of this as much as I like the computer side personally.
And I think like with these decisions, like this is decisions that people at leadership level, like department leads or higher, need to think about, like how to roll things out. You know, you decide a platform. Like for me, I'm pretty agnostic. Like I think as long as you decide, you can make it work. So in terms of like choosing between tools, it doesn't really matter, because each functionality will catch up. So okay, so one might use it faster than the others will be forced to catch up in the meantime. So the time where you might be slightly behind, the team won't be using 100% of the tools, so that they will notice that small amount of difference where the tool hasn't developed as much as another, for example. But as long as you've chosen a tool that meets the requirements that you need, the main thing is actually the follow-up to that. And that's what people don't do, is like, so you choose a tool and you implement it and you train the team, then what? Like, then you need to keep going. Like, is it working? So like in your case, Tom, if it feels like it's too technical for certain members of the team, like you might need to have a different training approach than obviously if you're just going to say, we're going to do these things in Google Workspace, which obviously the team know really well. So actually it'll be really easy for them to adopt. So you would need to take a different approach to training, and obviously do like more regular tech-ins, or do that you have, I don't know, like you're available an hour a week to talk through if people have problems. Like, so you have a different rollout approach. And then you also need to have some kind of goal to say, where do I want the team to be with this by what day, and are we meeting those goals? So is it that I need them to be using this for this certain outcome? Have they got there or not? If not, why? And what we're going to do to address that. So you need to have certain goals with like the rollout, and then be able to adapt and say, okay, this is what, in most cases it should work, right? So whatever you choose, you just need to make sure that what you're doing actually gets the team to where you want them to be, and that's not vague. Where you want them to be at a certain endpoint is not undefined, because that's where it won't work.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, there's always a lot to consider, but I think the key thing that a lot of people need to make sure they have first is just your SOPs anyway, because a lot of the things I'm doing really are benefiting from us going through the hard work, and it has been hard work, of documenting what we do anyway. If anyone's watching this and hasn't actually even outlined how they do things already, then just go and do the good business practice of documenting what you do, because this becomes a lot easier because you have those references for the AI to help build upon in the first place. And it will really compound if you have those foundations.
And there's tons of tools, obviously, like AI tools for really helping with SOP documentation as well. So, you know, there's so many, it's so fast to do it now that there's really no excuses for teams not having documented their processes, because there are a combination of different tools you can use that make this so easy. And then you have a much better opportunity to address how you can improve them, document what you do now, and then you can address how to improve them after. So Andy, just quickly to close off this subject. So in a smaller team, adoption can be quicker, but you still have to decide what's safe and worth it. How do you choose where AI belongs in a workflow versus where it shouldn't be involved?
I think we spoke earlier about experimentation. As a small team where everyone has a distinct job, there really has to be a degree of letting people try and test things. My team specifically, we're all experienced and qualified, so I wouldn't feel that it's my place to sit there and go, everyone needs to do this and they need to do it this way. Everyone has a role and it's used in different ways. So for example, my business partner, Ben, his role is pay-per-click. You know, he's a ex-Googler. That's all he does. He's using it in a very different way. You have to use it within that ecosystem now because it's built in. For me, what I've always kind of noted, believed, and advocate for is that if you are going to use any AI tool in any way, you must know what good looks like before you're using it for that. It would be really terrible of me to take a team member who has no experience in one area and say, go and do this job, just use AI to do it. Because if they don't know what it's supposed to look like, if they don't know what the output's meant to be, then how can you trust their input or what goes on in the middle? So we need to use each tool like it's an assistant, a helper. I wouldn't even say a junior, because I would say that really kind of is insulting to, juniors, their brains, their thinking process. But I don't know who it was before that mentioned fundamentals, but you must know the fundamentals of what you're covering before you use it for any output. If you're using it to write, then you should be able to be a good writer yourself. If you're using it for data analysis, you need to know how to do that. If you're using it for SEO, you need to know how SEO works. If you're using it for code, oh my God, you should absolutely know what good looks like, because, I've seen it write 2,000 lines of code where maybe 20 would do, truly. And I've met people who are, someone argued with me on LinkedIn when I posted about a task that I'd been, I forget what it was now, but I'd been experimenting with something. Someone's like, well, I produced a whole website in 4 hours. sent me a link, and this website was terrible. It had so many things wrong with it, and you know, someone else jumped on and commented and said, well, this is broken, and he's like, well, it only took me like one prompt to fix it. It actually took like a semicolon and 2 words to fix it. But I'm not going to get in there and argue with people. It's the wrong people to argue with, isn't it? But if you don't know what a good outcome looks like, then it's my opinion that you shouldn't be using it, you know. And it's it's not really ethical to be selling people web solutions when you don't know anything about design, development, accessibility. You've got no background in UX or any of those things. But plenty of people do it. But yeah, that's in a nutshell. Know what success and know what good looks like.
And I think like where we are right now in terms of AI is that like AI obviously is dependent on input, as we all know. And the thing is, like, it still needs experts, like you said. Like, you need to be able to check, and especially if you're selling that as a service, like there does need to be someone who is checking. So the point should be that you should be thinking, how can I use AI to speed up what I'm doing? So what parts of this process like do not require my kind of expertise? Like, you shouldn't be excluding it from building a website. You should be using it for the parts that are like just not a good use of your time, or the repetitive parts. Like, but in terms of knowing what makes a good website, I mean, honestly, things are developing so fast that it will be that things like advance so much in AI that it will improve so much that it will start to do some of those sense checks themselves. And the way that we as experts will need to evolve to deal with that will change as technology evolves. But right now we're in that place that it needs checking. Like every output needs checking, and we as experts are the ones that can do that, selling the services. So we did have I just want to ask one final question, because it like kind of closes off this one and it's more people focused. So what agency leaders often find is like resistance and fear from the team, obviously for a variety of reasons. So because they feel like parts of their job are at risk, because they just don't understand, like they feel like AI is moving so quickly, they don't understand technology, and they feel like that's a risk to their reputation or to their roles. So sorry, I'm just going to ask the last question to you. So you've built culture and leaders in a remote environment. What does AI resistance actually look like inside teams, and what's the most effective way to address it without making it personal?
So a 3-minute answer. So far, I've not really had resistance show up in the sense of people saying they don't like it, although, as Tom sort of alluded to, I've had the odd nervy comment, right? Like it's out to get our jobs. More often, you have to keep an eye out for, I suppose, like inconsistent use or people using it privately. So I find like you might get a bit of work land on your desk and it's clearly been completed by AI, but no one's really held their hands up to that. And I've also seen on the other side, sometimes it can be over-reliance as well. So people literally copy the output because it feels safer than thinking it through. And as Andy was sort of saying, it alludes to the fundamentals not being there. They're not quite the expert and they're just copying and pasting. So I'd say, yeah, in most cases, it's about mindset. And back to processes again, as you said, there's so easy now. You can literally do a video and it will spit out the process for you. So there's no excuse not to do that and to have what good looks like. And as Tom said, like, I want the team to be buzzing about it. We've done quite a few hackathons, got people together, shared and got excited about the things that you can complete with it. And then lastly, for me, I suppose I'd say to roll it out, it all comes down to your leaders. Like, I want our leaders to be leading by example, not just celebrating the wins from those hackathons we're doing and the excitement, but, you know, showing where it's perhaps not landed so well and how we rectify and build back from that, and just avoiding being critical of any work that comes out, because as soon as you do that, people get that fear in them and the trust sort of erodes on like being honest about if they've used it. So yeah, I think get your team together, have some fun with it first and foremost, and then get your SOPs in order and build from there.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you so much to our panelists. I just want to leave you with a couple of takeaways. So the best thing to do is to really think as leaders about what you are using AI for as an agency and communicating that with your team. Standardize your workflows before scaling your use of AI and measure your impact. So look at time saved, quality and margin, not just how much you're using those tools. Think about it related to business output. If you identify with any of this, so I run AI in agencies, which is looking at how to implement AI more effectively across your agency with some of these things that you've mentioned. So like doing an audit of your processes, looking at actually how you put it in place in practice and using the tools that you have more effectively and measuring those outcomes, and doing this with members of your team really help implement AI and any process and automations more effectively. So it's good to have a systematic approach to how you look at your processes and therefore use the right tools to improve them, measure the returns, and then continuously do that. So if anyone's interested, please do get in touch with me about how this could help you. Thank you so much to our panelists. It's been a really good discussion. Let's finish on time. So thanks very much to everyone who attended. I hope you enjoyed it as well. I'll share the recording and the notes afterwards. And we do these monthly, so if you want to keep an eye for other ones, I'll share the one for February in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.